Thank you for joining us. This is TechWorks NC Series Nurse Call Technical Training Part 4. I am Mark Dundas and I will be your host. This is a 4-part training session. This is the last part, Part 4, System Programming. Hopefully you've looked at the other sections before this to familiarize yourself with the product so that we can now talk about how to program it and make it work the way your customer wants it. There is, as always, a presentation guide handout available online for you to download and take notes. And there will be a certification test available at the end of this session for you to prove that you've watched all 4 sections and know what our product is and how it works and so on and so forth. Just quickly, let's review so we all agree we know what we're looking at here. TechWorks is a manufacturer of a nurse call product called NC Series, and this product is a tone visual light and tone system designed to work from 1 station to 256 stations, and it is UL 1069 tested, listed for healthcare facility use. Okay, now of our product, there is only 4 devices that have installer settings or programming that affect how it performs. So these are the dip switches on the back of the dome light. This is the dome light that is an NCDL12, then the color, red, white, or blue, followed by the letters SCT. These dip switches determine whether this unit is a master or a slave, whether it's standalone or part of a system, and whether the tone is active or off. On the NCCM16, there is a rotary switch for addressing. There's the dip switches, which configure the system for having station supervision. Also, the functionality of the zone outputs, and also an end-of-line terminator for the network. When station supervision is on, unused station ports need to be switched out of service. The zone outputs are assigned by the zone station assignment switches, zone 1, zone 2. Then we have the annunciators NCAN16 CT and the AN32 CT, both of which share the same CPU assembly or bottom board. This bottom board has a rotary hex switch, which sets the address of this device. It also has 2 sets of dip switches, one that sets the functionality, the other that sets the tone options. Now let's talk specifically about the NCDL12 SCT. This dip switch sets all the functionality of this station. What that means is, because it is a room controller, it has to know what you expect it to do. On the back of each device is a silk screen, which helps the installer know how to set the dip switches to get the functionality they want. These are the 4 different configurations of that dip switch that are relevant. First, the switches being 1 and 2 up and 3 down create a slave. What does that mean? The slave is just doing whatever it's told. It doesn't think for itself. 1 down, 2 and 3 up creates a master, a standalone master. What does that mean? It's going to function totally on its own without a control module. All it needs is a local power supply, and it functions totally standalone. The next question is this part of a system? Then you turn to off. So again, if 2 is on, that means it's standalone. If 2 is off, that means it is part of a system or connected to a control module. If 3 is on, that means it is acting as a master with a slave. Now, what does that mean? That means that these screw terminals over here that go out to the next station are not repeating the flash clock from this screw terminal from the control module. They're actually repeating that flash output, that flash screw right there. The third screw from the top is actually putting out the status of this local light. So it can be repeated by a slave. So this is critical. If you've got 2 dome lights associated with a single station, let's say you've got a pull station in a restroom inside a room and a dome light outside of that restroom, as well as a dome light outside of the room, you want one to be the master, hooked to the control module, and the second one to be a slave. Which one you choose doesn't matter, as long as you hook the pull station to the one that's set as a master. So the one that has the pull station hooked to it has to have switch 3 turned on so that it will repeat its status out of this screw terminal to the slave, which is the second dome light. So this is if it's part of a system, and this is what you do if you want it to be part of a system with a slave. This is the normal use of this dome light is all dip switches off, which means it is functioning as a unit with a control module, and it can use repurposed wiring or Cat5. Doesn't matter. The tone on-off switch is exactly what it says. If this unit's tone is off, it's not going to make any noise. If you turn it on, it's going to make a tone every time the light changes. Let's talk about the control module, because this is where most of the programming occurs. First and foremost is the address. The address identifies this unit as one of 16. It's in hex, so the labeling on the switch is 1 through F. But it determines on the network that's hooked to this 4-screw terminal to the left which unit it is and what annunciator it will appear on. Then there's the supervision and configuration switches. Number 1 is station wire supervision. 2 and 3 are used to control the output of these zones. What comes out of here? What comes out of each of these screws? And screw number 4 is the network terminator. So if this is the last device on the end of the network, you want that switch number 4 turned on. Station out of service. If dip switch number 1 in the configuration is turned on, that means that the control module is going to supervise the wire out to the stations. This wire plugged in down here is going to be supervised. So if you have a dome light that is not plugged in other words, unused ports, you have to put them out of service so that this thing will stop thinking it's got a bad dome light or a dome light that has a bad piece of wire. So you flip these to the right for all stations that are not connected to a dome light. This is your zone output. Zone 1, zone 2. This is your assignment switches. So you have 16 individual switches, one for each of these ports, and they are labeled 1 through 16. If you want to include a station in a zone output, you turn this switch up. It can be any combination or all stations. Doesn't matter. Any one or all. Zone 2 is identical, same thing. As I said, this selects what is included in this zone output, which stations are included. Let's get more specific about these zone outputs because this is one of the most confusing things. So this changed in the evolution of this product with Code Blue. It went from being a single light output, meaning only 3 screws. You had plus and minus power with 1 screw here in the middle, to a 2 screw, meaning a 2 color zone light output. When we did that, we had to figure out how are we going to accommodate some of the simple applications where you don't need all 4 screws. You don't have a top and a bottom color, meaning a duty station. We'll talk more about that, but we had to accommodate the application where you had a duty station versus a dome light, a 2-color dome light. These screw terminals, the first one is plus 24 volts. The second is the Code Blue, or it could be an e-call output, again, depending on the configuration switches. This one is e-call or normal call, or in one case, if this is to drive a single color zone light, this screw does nothing at all. Number 4 is your common for your power. Zone 2 is exactly the same as zone 1, just separate selection switches, but the wiring and the configuration and how it works is exactly the same. So your zone 1 assignment switches can be any station, any one station, or any combination of stations being sent out your zone. Same for zone 2. This is the thing that gets most confusing. Switch number 1 is for supervision. That's on or off. If you want supervision, you turn it on. If you don't want supervision, you turn it off. The confusing part is these option switches. Option 1 and option 2 determine what comes out of the zone outputs over here. No option, meaning both switches are off, functions just like an old NCCM16. What does that mean? Pretend this only had 3 screws here. Take that screw away, and what you've got is any signal, whether it's an N call, an E call, or a Code Blue, comes out of that screw that's second from the top. Same down here. You got power, then you got your flash screw. This screw does nothing, and this screw is your common. So that screw is the only one that matters on both outputs. This screw does nothing. Let's say you go to option number 1 on. Now what happens? Now your top screw or top light screw sends a Code Blue message when Code Blue is active on any of these ports, meaning a super fast flash output to drive your 2-color dome light, or it could just be you want a dome light that only indicates Code Blue. You could have a zone light that only indicates Code Blue. It would come out of this screw. This screw in this configuration is for your N call and your E call. So any normal call will be indicated by a steady contact closure. Any E call will be indicated by a flashing closure. That's the same for zone 2 as well. Now let's go to the option where option 2 is on. This creates a fast flash and E-call on screw 2, meaning that your E-call comes out of this screw. So imagine you've got a red-white system. No Code Blue, just red-white. You want your red or top element to be fast flashing and your white element to be your normal calls. So that's how that works. Same for zone two. So far, zone one and zone two function exactly the same with option switch one and two. Now we're going to change that. We thought, what happens if someone wants a combination of staff duty stations, which only take 3 screws, and a 2-color code blue dome light? Well, welcome to both option switches up. Zone one does code blue. Okay, so zone one right here does code blue exactly like option one. So the functionality that happened here comes out here with both switches up. Zone two, however, functions like an old style control module. So you've only got these 3 screws: power, your call or flash, and your common. That gives you the ability to hook up duty stations to one terminal and code blue to the other. Output devices. TechWorks makes a couple of annunciators, the NC-AN16CT and the AN32T. Both have a built-in tone and are easy to label. Zone outputs. These are your NC-SDS staff duty station with tone and lighted silence button. Your NCDL12RSCT is your, when it's set up as a slave, is your single color zone output. And the NCDL22C is your 2-color without tone. These annunciators both share the same CPU assembly, which means you don't need to learn 2 different things to make these 2 work. They both know what they're doing. The address is a rotary hex switch that is set to match the control module that you want to display, or control modules if it's a 32-point display. So you set this with a screwdriver to the address that matches the first control module you want to display on an NC16. On the 32, the address that this is set to will display the matching control module on the left 4 columns, and it will display the next control module in numeric address sequence on the right 4 columns. So you get 2 control modules or 32 points. The dip switches marked as functions don't do anything much on this. The functions are preset and predetermined by UL 1069 requirements. However, dip switch number 4 does have some functionality. It should be turned on because UL 1069 says that you have to sound a tone with every light change. However, you do have the option of making a quiet master. By turning this switch off, it won't enunciate on steady lamps. It will only enunciate on flashing lamps, meaning emergency or code blue calls. So that's what that does. That turns the tone on and off for a steady lamp. The next set of dip switches determines which row on the annunciator is going to display and have a tone. In a nurse call, you want all of these on, but switch number 1 turns on row 1, switch number 2 turns on row 2, switch number 3 turns on row 3, and switch number 4 turns on row 4. This is much more important in a clinic call environment which shares the same hardware, because maybe you only want to hear the tone with a yellow light or a blue light or a red light or a green light. In nurse call, all lights should be on. All tones should be on. This concludes the series for NC series nurse call. We are available to help you in any way. online 24/7, 365 at techworks-usa.com. You'll find brochures, specifications, design and quoting assistance, and of course, technical assistance. We do appreciate it if you watch these videos and look at the installation manual before you call for tech support. Most of your questions will be answered either in the videos or in the manual, or both. Thank you once again for your time today. Thank you for your interest in TechWorks products. Thank you always for your support, and tell us how to help.